I'm so excited.
Yay.
Hey, welcome everybody to Brilliantly Sexy with Devina Kaur. And today it is my honor, and I am so excited to invite Mark Metry to the show. He is, believe it or not, only 23 years old, but he is so successful that I'm very intimidated right now. So if I stop speaking in the show, you'll understand why. But Mark is a published author. He's the founder of a podcast called Humans 2.0, where he interviews inspirational people in the community. And his book is called Screw Being Shy. So Mark has this incredible journey of, over losing about, how much weight did you lose? 100 pounds. And being extremely shy, being extremely awkward. And today he is sharing his wisdom as a speaker, as a podcast host, and more than that, just a real life, authentic person who we admire so much. So Mark, thank you so much for joining us on Brilliantly Sexy, and we are so honored and so humbled. Please share a little bit about your story and what motivated you start the podcast Humans 2.0, which is featured by Forbes, NASDAQ, and Yahoo Finance.
Devina, thank you so much for having me on, and no need to be intimidated. I hope I don't come across as intimidating. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people just look at my age and they see what I post on the internet and what I've got going on. And, I'm a big believer that, you shouldn't compare yourself regardless of age. Like the reality is that there are 16-year-olds out there who are killing me, who are way more successful than me. And so I could play the same game with myself. And I'm like, I'm 23, I'm super young. Honestly, I think the best way I can introduce myself is that I spent the first part of my life literally thinking and believing the opposite for the most part of everything that I am a living, breathing example of today. I didn't want anybody to know my story. I didn't want anybody to know my name. I didn't even know that I had a story. And I just wanted to just fit into the background. I was always that kid in the back of the classroom. I was always the kid who sat by himself. I was always the kid who was super shy, never really spoke up, never talked. And so, by the time I was like 18, I kind of had this really interesting moment in my life where I kind of hit rock bottom, which led me to face a lot of pain and a lot of issues and a lot of problems, which ultimately led to, giving me some sense of clarity or motivation to like change my life. And that's come in so many forms, from my mental health to my physical health, to my community, to different things in the world that I've been able to start, like different businesses, my podcast. And so, it's been definitely quite a journey, but ultimately it's just like, I'm doing everything now that I thought I would never do ever in my entire life. So I'm just out here to try to spread it, whether that's podcasting, LinkedIn, whatever it is.
Wow. And that's so... I remember being 18, I remember being 22, and I remember being lost. I remember having no purpose in life. And this is so commendable that you're so young, yet, you've, like you said, through accident, through like just looking for the reason of being born, that you are here celebrating and inspiring so many of us, including me. And the way you write, especially on LinkedIn, I follow you on LinkedIn, and I'm like, I look at your post and I'm like, I mean, like, really, this wisdom cannot be from a 20-year-old, 20-year-old. And then I'm like, damn, do I love him? Do I hate him? What do I do? So Mark and I, Mark doesn't know this, but we have this love-hate relationship, right? Because honestly, Mark, I would, I happen to have written a book, but I'm not a gifted writer. I was so lost for so many years, and I still struggle with being fat, and I still struggle with accepting my anxiety, my depression, and So I want you to talk to us a little bit about your shy side, your book, Screw Being Shy. My goodness, what a name! Tell us more about that and what prompted you to write the book, and also, what happened first? Was it the podcast? Was it the book?
Yeah, well, first off, I'm a terrible writer. I failed so many English writing classes, and I literally learned how to write by myself by there was just like this period of time where I was starting this business and I was writing an article every single day about stuff that I had no idea. It was about like technology and all this stuff. And I just learned how to write over the years. I use this like website called Hemingway app or something like that like teaches you how to write simply. My sister is also an English teacher. So I remember like if I passed English class when I was growing up, it was because I literally had her edit things. So I'm like literally a terrible writer. But the thing is though, is that I honestly feel like I've been failing for my entire life, that I would rather just write a book, just take one step every single day and put it out there. And even if it fails, at least I did something, at least I created something. And so that's like my entire thinking. But yeah, no, so I kind of started my podcast in 2017 when I had no idea what I was doing, and I still have no idea what I'm doing. But it was really a vehicle, a tool for me to be like, hey, if I want to learn more about, meditation, I'm going to use my podcast to interview the top 10 experts in meditation so that I can not necessarily become a better meditator, but I can integrate meditation more in my life to master my mind more. If I'm interested in like food and nutrition, I'm going to go and interview the top 10, like nutritionist doctors that are credible to speak on that field on my podcast. And so really for me, when I look at it over the years, my podcast has been a very personal tool. And so, yeah, after that, like, honestly, pretty recently, I got the idea to write my book, like towards the middle of last year. And I just went for it. And yeah, for me, it's like when I was 15, 16 years old, I faced a lot of external success. I started making mad money, and that sounds cool, and it was cool. But that taught me very early on in life that success doesn't have to do that much with the physical life, with physical reality. And ever since I, was making like six figures when I was like 17 years old, and yet I was like depressed and anxious, that's really where I began to learn that you could have a ton of money, you could have great social status, but yet at the end of the day, if you don't have a good relationship with your brain, that doesn't even matter. And then I did my podcast, and I started hearing from all these people who are like billionaires to like these extremely successful people. And they tell me the same exact thing of how when they had like $400 million in their bank account, they were super depressed and they were suicidal. And so just like really learning this, really hearing about it from other people, experiencing it in my own life, that really like set me on the quest to just like try to understand the human brain, try to understand the different factors that can affect someone, from anxiety to social anxiety to depression to obesity to suicide to a lot of different things that I personally faced. And so, yeah, Screw Being Shy, it's just sort of like a culmination, both of like a personal account of my story, but really just more practical things of what people can do to not just like say screw being shy, not just like put on some false bravado sense of confidence that most people do, but how to actually have that at a root level cause. And so in the book, I go deep into like neuroscience. I go deep into how your brain structures your identity. I go into like how you can move that, how you can change that. What are the steps that people can take to create a runway for them to take off and build momentum. And so, yeah, I mean, it's been an interesting journey, and I'm always learning, and I'm always, citing people who are more credible than me, because I don't really know what I'm talking about, except for personal reasons, personal facts.
I love it. And then I also want to know, how did you manage to lose from 220 pounds? You are about, how much do you weigh? It doesn't really matter, but you've obviously lost so much weight, and you're healthier, happier. You are showing up on camera from, being shy and not doing this and all. So tell me a little bit about, how did that change of food happen? Was it your eating habits? Was it exercising? Was it meditation?
Yeah. So So I was like 230 pounds, and at the start of this year, I was 145 pounds. Now I'm 165 because I'm trying to gain weight, muscle. Um, but this is really what happened. So when I was in college when I was 18, I kind of entered.
By the way,
Yeah.
when Mark was 18 in his college dorm, that's when he started his podcast. So
not exactly. I started my podcast a couple of years after that. It was kind of like after I had figured some things out in here. But basically what happened was I kind of faced my own like rock bottom in college where I was just filled with so much pain that I had no idea what to do. And personally for me, you know, my parents had always taught me like, you know, don't do drugs or alcohol. And so in terms of trying to find a way to escape that pain, my real drug was food. And I was always taught that like, you know, like there's nothing wrong with eating food. It doesn't matter. It's just food. You can buy it at any store. And so I just kind of used food as an emotional crutch of where I just didn't know what to do with my life. And then literally every single day after class, I would just like binge out. I would eat all kinds of food, mostly all junk food. I wasn't binging on broccoli. And honestly, I don't even know what happened. Like it was like a trance that I was in, that I was like stuck in for like 3-4 months. And it was just like me being in pain and just falling into these cycles, these patterns, and then not even being able to stop myself. And it wasn't until I began to face more serious health problems in terms of like, I couldn't sleep anymore. I had really bad insomnia. My skin also started to do some really interesting things. Like I would, I don't know if it was eczema, but all of a sudden I would just like look down and my skin would be like red and it would be itchy. And so there were a few things that were happening that ultimately led me to just kind of like having an honest moment with myself. And I actually specifically remember, you know, there was a time where I was suicidal and I would go for walks at night in really dangerous areas. And I remember one time I came back to my dorm room and I looked at myself in the mirror and I kind of like made direct eye contact with myself. And I just kind of asked myself, like, who am I? And like, who am I becoming? And what am I doing? And I remember when I was staring at myself in the mirror, I remember looking down and I remember being like, oh snap, like why are my pants so tight on me? And I remember like that being the very first time where I actually realized that I was overweight, because up to then I had no idea sort of what was happening. I really lacked that present moment conscious awareness. And so when that happened, I was like, man, you know, I got to do something about this, you know? So I remember doing what I bet a lot of people out there are doing, which is I remember going on Google and typing in, you know, how do I lose weight? And I remember just like falling down this rabbit hole of all kinds of stuff from like, you know, follow this diet, follow this, eat once a day or eat 6 times a day or go keto or go plant-based or go this or go that. And it's just so confusing. But ultimately I ended up just like learning more about nutrition. And I basically learned that the food that you eat, it is way more than just calories. The food that you eat is way more than just something that you put in your mouth when you're hungry. The food that you eat literally provides information to all of your cells in your body. And if you just think about it, you know, like if you're born and you have a brain, you have a heart, you have lungs, other than like how you're born from your mom, all of your organs are being created and regenerated on a daily basis from the food that you eat. Nothing else creates it. And so I just started thinking like, do I really want my brain to be made out of Doritos and Oreos and things that are made in science labs by scientists, by billion-dollar corporations that are literally designing food for the average person to be addicted to it? And so when I started thinking about it like that, and I started looking at the research of how this affects, more importantly, your mental health, I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I didn't know this. And I basically just started eating a diet of just natural foods. I just stopped eating junk food. I stopped drinking soda. I stopped eating anything that was artificial, anything that wasn't a whole food, that didn't come from the ground and it was made in some factory or laboratory. I stopped eating it. And what happened was I lost the weight extremely fast. And more importantly, though, I felt like my brain turned on for the first time in my life.
Wow.
And so I was kind of doing like a version of like I don't know if you ever heard of the bulletproof eating regimen, but it's basically like a version of like paleo, keto. It's more fat based. And so when I just started eating like healthy fats for the first time in my life, that's where I truly felt like my brain turned on, and I stopped eating all this crap that I was eating, Sour Patch Kids, and ice cream and whatnot. And so that eventually,
I'm in shock, because that's like, oh my goodness, wow, that's what transformation is. You know, that's like, you think it's impossible, but it really happened to you.
it's step by step. And I think the biggest thing is just like this is the thing that I feel like I faced a lot, not just with this, but in every aspect of life that prevented me to transform, was I was very insecure. I had no confidence whatsoever. I wasn't sure of myself, but I had a massive ego. I always thought I was right. I always thought that I knew what that was. So like whenever someone would walk up to me and they would give me some information, I'd be like, oh yeah, I already know that. And then if you're living life like that, then it's like, you literally can't change. There's nothing that you can do because your ego has you trapped inside, controlling your own behavior. And so it's literally just step after step after step after step, talking to smarter people, reading something, learning, applying, failing, realizing that doesn't work, trying to get back up, trying to get at it. And so, yeah, I mean, it's been quite a journey. We're now here in 2020 and yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. And you know what, like you said, it's trying again and again and never giving up on what truly matters, which is your own relationship with yourself. And Mark, as you know, they don't teach this to us in university, the idea of self-love, the idea of, you know, living in consciousness and living in love with life, right? So I'm so glad you're sharing your journey with us, because I mean, one of my goals is to become a frugivore. And frugivore is basically somebody who just lives eating fruit, right? And
I thought that was called a fruitarian.
A fruitarian, a frugivore is also, you eat some vegetables, but I'm like, it seems so hard to do, but you know what?
That seems pretty extreme.
It is.
I wouldn't be able to do that. If I did that, I would die. There's no way I could do that.
Well, you know, in the corrupt system that we live in, nobody works in our favor, right? So when you start going deeper into the study of food and health and consciousness, then you're like, maybe, you know, maybe our ancestors were frugivores, and maybe that's something to look into. And I'm not saying that we all have to do that, but that's something that I'm studying right now, right? But, you know, this is interesting. So now, like, how hard has it been for you to keep that food regimen of eating only natural food or unprocessed food? Do you ever cheat, and what's your experience with that?
Yeah, so I don't really like that word, cheating. You know, for me, I think one of the biggest things is like, you shouldn't place a moral value on food. You shouldn't place a moral value on something that you do just because your behavior. You know, I have a lot of friends who have varying opinions. I have friends who are plant-based. I have friends who don't follow any diet. I have friends who do this, who do that. And honestly, I think the biggest thing is like, we just need to stop demonizing food. And I think it's that demonization of food that then lets people to like create these crazy diets that no rational person can do, that would actually lead them to just breaking it all the time and having it kind of be a lost cause, in my opinion. So yeah, I mean, sometimes I definitely, like, if I'm out, if it's a special occasion, if I'm with someone, you know, I don't know, I'll have like a drink or something, or I'll, you know, maybe eat like last weekend. Last weekend, it was like 1 a.m. Crazy story, but I went to Insomnia Cookies. I don't know if you've ever been there, but they have like these deluxe cookies. I had this crazy one. It was literally the first cookie I probably had in like 2 years. But it's like, if I'm someone who I'm eating healthy 95% of the time, I don't see anything wrong with trying to, not cheat, but like just eat whatever you want. Like I think that's the big thing. And I talk to people who have like these like really interesting views. And honestly, I just think like we just need to get back to natural. Like if you study different cultures, different traditions, none of them stuck to one food group. They all just ate what was natural. And like the reality is that there wasn't enough plants for everyone to go vegan back then. It's not natural. It's not possible. And so I think the biggest thing is just like do that. And then if you want to take a step further, there are different kinds of health tests, but you have to be careful because a lot of them are scams. The one that I do trust is called it tests your gut microbiome. I don't know if you've heard of that, but basically like if you really want to know the key to health and you really want to know the key to like mental health, it's understanding your gut microbiome. And in my chapter where I talk about this, I say first my gut broke and then my brain broke. And the reason why I think food is so important for mental health is because when you break down mental health, you realize that there are a few fundamental neurotransmitters that are in our brain that literally control our behavior. And so, for example, one of the key ones is called serotonin. And Devina, I'm sure you've heard of serotonin. Serotonin, it regulates your mood. It also does other things too a lot of people don't know about. It regulates your mood. It regulates your appetite. It regulates your sexual desire. And it regulates how you function and how you communicate in social groups. And so I really did a lot of research on this for my book. And it actually turns out that most of serotonin, this neurotransmitter that literally controls our lives, it turns out most of it isn't even in your brain. Most of it is in your gut microbiome. And the way you control your gut microbiome is with food. And so when I found that out, and you basically realize that your gut is this ecosystem of trillions of bacteria, that whenever you eat a food, it goes to them and they process it and they eat it and then they pass it off to your body. And so there are all kinds of correlations between various chronic illnesses, mental health problems, between a disrupted gut microbiome. And that largely happens due to your dietary choices and then like a psychological stress trauma that you may experience. And so those are the two biggest ones. And so that's what I'm trying to focus on, because those are really the inputs. Because if you can control those, then you can control that. And the second thing that I want to say, if possible, is so many people, when they start to go on a diet and they say, hey, I'm not going to eat junk food. I'm not going to eat junk food. I'm not going to eat junk food. What happens is they usually don't focus on what to eat. So then they just go back to junk food. This is just human psychology. This happened to me. The real key to understanding is that there is a multi-billion-dollar industry that is literally designed around how can we hijack Mark's taste buds and Mark's brain to literally make this food as bingeable as possible. And so for sure, some people may not be susceptible to that. But the reality is the large percentage of like the population is extremely susceptible to that. And so for the most part, I think a major reason why a lot of us have these health problems and issues with our food eating and whatnot is literally because our nervous systems, our gut microbiomes have been hijacked by companies that have been literally showing us fast food advertisements on TV ever since we were 5 years old. And so that's the biggest thing, is like we need to get away from that. And there are a lot of great companies who are creating a lot of great things with healthy ingredients that don't hurt our bodies or our brains. And so that's like the biggest thing that I would tell someone, like, don't focus on not eating junk food because that's impossible. Focus on trying to crowd out junk food with as much healthy things as possible. And if you're someone who's never eaten healthy, for example, negotiate with yourself. Start off small. Like if you hate all healthy foods, but for example, you love avocados, or you love salmon, or you love eggs, or you love carrots, literally just eat those foods. Like literally just try to find what you like and do it. And the last thing that I want to say, Devina, is that one of the most important things that I've learned on this journey is that I love and appreciate food so much more today than I did before. I talk to a lot of my friends who just, eat the standard American diet. And they tell me like, Mark, you don't get upset that you have to like restrict yourself to not eat that brownie, or you have to restrict yourself. You have to control yourself to not eat this. And it's just like in my brain, I'm not restricting myself at all. I'm just making a conscious decision. And I know that personally, I would rather have 4 hours of happiness or 4 hours of energy compared to 5 minutes of me chewing this substance. And then my brain drugs me with pleasure and neurochemicals. And the last thing is that what you'll realize is if someone walks away from junk food, what you'll realize is that your taste buds, your tongue, literally becomes more powerful. And so what I mean is this. I remember as a kid, I'd eat all kinds of Sour Patch Kids and ice cream and all this stuff. And now I don't eat any of that stuff. And anything sweet that I eat is like fruit. And now if I bite into like a nice juicy ripe peach, that is sweeter than any dessert that I have ever had in my life. And it's actually because your taste buds get desensitized when you consume artificial chemicals. But if you just stick to natural things, literally all of the natural foods, all of a sudden they get jacked in terms of their sweetness and their flavor. And so that's like the biggest thing. Like I literally appreciate and I actually value and I taste food better because I eat healthy food. And so that's the biggest thing. Like we have to get out of our bodies from this highly industrialized game that happens literally the moment whenever we go on Instagram and we get a sponsored ad that has been designed by some marketer who understands human psychology and who does that. And like, for example, I was looking at this study that showed in grocery stores, the aisles where kids break down and cry the most is in cereal aisles. And so if you look at it, cereal companies, Kellogg's, General Mills, these companies have invested billions and billions of dollars. I remember literally watching commercials of like Lucky Charms, Frosted Flakes, and that is built in my head. But cereal companies are extremely smart, and they actually know that if you look at evolutionary psychology and you look at evolutionary biology and how we became humans, there's a theory that says we developed color vision in our eyes in order to detect fruit, because fruit is one of the few things in nature that is a very bright color. So we could detect that in the trees and then go for it. Now, if you walk down the cereal aisle, all these boxes are bright red, bright yellow, bright purple. And so cereal companies literally know this, and they do that because they're trying to take advantage of a little kid who probably isn't well fed. He's probably not well nutritioned. His brain is probably heavily inflamed. Maybe he has ADD, probably from the food and the lack of sleep that he has. And he's going to go towards the cereal because it's what his brain is telling him. It's because he has no energy. That's his source of energy. And so this is like the biggest problem by far. I don't think the problem is eating meat. I don't think the problem is eating whatever kind of food group that the health and wellness industry wants to demonize for a decade. It's like literally we just need to eat natural foods and get away from the processed crap that is created by scientists in factories and laboratories.
That is so well said, Mark. And you know what? This really hits home because I am in recovery from bulimia. And it's been, and now I don't have it as much as I had it when I was a teenager. And I write about it in my book called Too Fat, Too Loud, Too Ambitious. So this really relates, it really, really relates to what you're saying. But also, like, one of the things that, and I want you to jump in, one of the ways that I managed to control my bulimia or to work around my bulimia was to replace those fried food, those cereals, those processed food with green vegetables. So what do you say to that, Mark?
I think that's an amazing thing. I think fried foods are definitely not good at all. And so I think, whatever someone can do to substitute foods, that's like the best thing. And like, this is the thing too. There are healthier foods being created right now. Like there are many, many companies who see what's going on, who are reacting to the market, and they're creating foods that are like things like ice cream, chips, cookies, but they're healthy. And so that's like a slippery slope. But that's one of the biggest things. And I have
I want to say something. So one of the things that I learned was when I look at a label and if I cannot pronounce a name, like fructose, glucose, whatever, I don't buy it. So that's been my rule, and maybe but it doesn't mean that I'm not overweight. I am still overweight, but the thing is, I'm managing to choose wisely what you can. And another thing that I do is also look at the sugar content, because for example, I will eat non-gluten food, and then when you look at these boxes of non-gluten pasta, you're gonna find that they've replaced gluten with sugar. So Mark, tell us a little bit about that and what your journey has been like.
Yeah, so this is the thing, right? So if you go to like Whole Foods and then you walk down the health aisle and you see all like these labels that are like organic, non-GMO, gluten-free, dairy-free, that does not mean it's good. And like, honestly, those products will probably have more crap in them. So I literally love your rule. That's the same rule I talk about in my book of like, if you're looking at an ingredients list and you don't recognize it, that means that your body won't recognize it either. And, honestly, I don't think it's necessarily about if you're obese or not, or whatever you are. I think at the end of the day, it's just like looking at the science. I think it's looking at your experience. And I think the biggest thing that I've learned, honestly, is that being overweight, being obese is not a discipline problem. It's not a willpower problem. Like a lot of people think that people are fat or whatever they are because they can't stop eating. And I don't really believe that. I truly believe it is an underlying cause of various things, from emotional problems to psychological trauma to your gut microbiome being and your nervous system being hijacked by all the foods that we ate as kids. That's what I think it is, because honestly, when people look at it from that perspective, people who are obese, I think they have the most willpower out of all of us, because like they have to sit there and like play this mental game of like, I'm not going to eat that. I'm not going to eat that. And I think that it's, to be honest with you, it's I think it's one of the biggest problems that nobody has been able to like rationally solve. And I don't know how to solve it, but it's definitely a major issue. And the other thing that I would say too is that what I have learned also from studying the gut microbiome is that someone may eat unhealthy and that may manifest in their body as obesity. It may manifest for someone else in their body as anxiety. And so like, for example, when I was growing up, I was a little bit chubby, but I was never really ever overweight. But for me, my health problems came in different ways. And so that's like one of the biggest things to remember, because obesity, I think, can be the same exact problem as someone having anxiety, but based on their genetics, based on their gut microbiome output, based on their coping mechanisms, it may appear to be one chronic illness or the other. But I think it's all the same sides of the coin. And so, that's why I love, people like you that are speaking up about this. I have some people close to me in my life who have faced different eating disorders and things similar. And it's a real problem that I don't really think the world is quite looking at from the correct perspective, or from the perspective that can help the most amount of people, to be honest with you. And it's kind of sad.
Well, I mean, as you said, the human emotions have been commercialized, right? We are a commodity, and the marketers know this. They're doing their job, but I mean, this is a broken system behind all of this. So unless we change the system, which is happening, but also it also
For sure.
takes awareness of ourselves to change, to be the change, right? So getting to know who you are, getting to know what you're
Absolutely.
Self-awareness is so sexy.
Seriously.
It's sexier when it comes from somebody as young as you, Mark. So thank you for that.
Yeah, no, of course. And like, I just want to say that I'm also in marketing too. And so I also view myself as having a responsibility against these things. And like a month ago, I posted on LinkedIn of this video from a friend of mine, Vishen Lakhiani, who's the founder of Mind Valley. And he talked about genius, irresponsible marketing. And he talked about Coca-Cola and all of the different crap that they have been able to do to literally become the number one contributor of obesity, heart disease, dementia in the world. And so that's something I'm always speaking about, especially because I know who's listening to me, especially on LinkedIn and my other marketing friends.
Mm-hmm. And that's very well said. And you know what? We cannot change everything around us, but we certainly can change ourselves. Be responsible, self-knowledge. I talk about radical self-acceptance. So not, like you said, escapism, whether that's alcohol, that's drugs, that's food. Like, stop running away from yourself, right? And accept.
So important.
Accept yourself, your emotions, your body, whether you're too fat, too loud, too ambitious, too shy, screw being shy. Like, connect to your divinity, and remember, we're all here for a higher purpose, right? So when we are living in that awareness, that's when true spiritual confidence and inner wealth happens.
That's the truth. And I know for myself, I'm still, I still have a lot of problems, and it's a daily struggle for me. And, something I always remember is just like, whenever I feel like I have upset myself, whenever I feel like I'm harsh on myself or I've done something wrong, quote unquote, I just always, like, I don't know if this is weird. I've never shared this on a podcast before, but I always stare at myself in the mirror and I say that I accept and I love you. And I've just learned to do that, because one of the biggest things is just like, if you don't accept something, and if you can't forgive yourself for making a mistake or making a potential problem or something that's bad, quote unquote, then you'll never accept yourself. And if you never accept yourself, then you'll never love yourself. And that's the entire point of life. And so that's like the biggest thing that I've learned too. So like, to never let that go, to, even though, things may be turbulent, things may be uncertain, to like always have a piece of you that understands that things will be okay. Have a piece of you that is kind of connected more to that higher power, kind of like spiritual realm, that knows that everything's going to be okay in the end. And I think that's just so important. I think that starts with you kind of like becoming your own best friend. And there's this practice called, there's this practice called mate. And it was actually taught to me by this guy named Alex Benign, who wrote this book called The Third Door. And it's this practice in Buddhism where it's basically like you talk to yourself as if you're talking to your best friend. And just that thing alone, as simple as that sounds, truly like trying to practice that in moments where you don't feel like it, that's like one of the most powerful things that you can do. And if you can do that, then that's like a little like like a little micro step in looking back and taking like 1,000 steps, And so that's the biggest thing that I sort of think about, because there's people out there who drink celery shakes every day, who go for 35-mile runs, and yet they still hate themselves. Wow. And so that's the biggest thing that I've learned. And so, yeah, I don't know if that made sense, but
that, that makes sense, because like, especially like Sexy Brilliant actually happened because of me overcoming an addiction. And one of the things that I said to myself, it didn't matter whether I had like $5 in my bank account or I was this fat person. I just looked at the mirror and I said, always sexy, always brilliant. So the words that we use for ourselves are so powerful, right? That's where the inner healing happens and the inner change happens. And when we are happy and healthy from ourselves, we also have more of this to share with others, more love, more abundance, more creativity too. And that's, connection to ourselves. So thank you, Mark. Before we go, I have two last things. One is, do you currently use something for brain training? Or have you used, or do you know something of, besides the food, moving to tools that you may use? And I'm sure you've written about this.
Yeah. Yeah. So, one of the things that I talk about is, and I'm just going to go back to, I was mentioning about serotonin and this neurotransmitter that controls a lot of our lives. So there's a study done by the Journal of Neuroscientists, and it's the most profound, legitimate study that basically shows these are the main ways that you can credibly grow your brain and increase serotonin or better regulate it in your body. And it's diet, which I already mentioned. It's sunlight, the sun, vitamin D, which also I remember when on my podcast, I had one of the world's top mental health doctors, Dr. Daniel Amen. This guy is like Justin Bieber and Miley Cyrus's mental health doctor. He's one of the best in the world. And he actually told me one of the commonalities that he's seen in all mental health problems is a deficiency in vitamin D, which you get from the sun, or it is in some foods like eggs and mushrooms and fish and animal products. And so yeah, that's too sun, like going out in the sun. People don't think about it. It's especially super important now because a lot of us are still quarantined or similar in that lifestyle. The third one is exercise. And I wouldn't even say exercise. I would just say movement. I think like literally going outside for a walk is in the sun is like one of the most powerful things that you could do. And so, yeah, that's it. And then the last one I believe was, changing your thoughts, like going to psychotherapy. And so, yeah, that's it. And are we also going to do like the cars that you had or something like that?
Yes. So thank you, Mark. I really appreciate all your wisdom. And guys, if you haven't checked out Mark, check him out at markmetry.com, but also, his podcast, Humans 2.0. And of course, School Being Shy. Like, I'm raising shy kids, so I understand, and I really appreciate your wisdom. And before we go, at the end of every show, we pull out the Sexy Brilliant cards. Now,
I'm so excited.
Yeah, these are divine wisdom. The thing is, some of them might be X-rated.
Where are you live streaming this to? Twitter only, or?
This is live everywhere, but it's also available on podcast, Mark. So when people search for you, they'll find this. Okay.
Oh God, this one's for the books.
Mark, choose a number between 1 and 50.
15.
1 and 50. 50.
Oh man, 19.
Oh, 19. Okay, I'm gonna be counting. In the meantime, Mark, feel free to tell us where do people who are listening in, where can they find you on social media?
Yeah, so Instagram and LinkedIn are the two best spots. If you just search for my name, MarkMetry, and if you add me on LinkedIn, please send me a personalized connection request so that I know that you came from Devina's podcast.
Yeah, please do. All right, we've got it. We've got a card for you, Mark.
Explore your body. Say enjoy your body.
So today's Sexy Brilliant card, it says, enjoy sex, enjoy your body. We are allowed to enjoy sex. And Mark, this is a great card because we, at Sexy Brilliant, we are talking about accepting ourselves for who we are, right? And sexuality is also a part of us, right? So we're not
so important.
We shouldn't be shy to accept the divine, beautiful, sexy side. Okay, so we are allowed to enjoy sex. Sex leads to deeper intimacy and deeper connections. Learn to talk about sex, open up. Sex can be fun and should be empowering. Self-acceptance means sexual acceptance. The more we know, and this one's important, the more we know our bodies, the better our actions and decisions. Keep practicing the orgasms as a way to self-understanding.
I have a lot of experience with that. I love that. No, I love that for real. And I actually, I was actually gonna put like a mini subsection on sexuality in my book, School Being Shy, because it is affiliated. But then I was like, let me do my own research on this first, then maybe add it in like 5 years later. But it really is so true. And I think so many of us have so much shame around our sexuality. I know for myself, like my parents are from Egypt. I'm Middle Eastern. There's so much stigma, so much taboo stuff going on, especially around sexuality in that. So if you never talk about it, if you don't sort of learn about it in a healthy way, cause all sorts of problems. And yes, this is an area that I definitely want to go more into for myself, and then also for a lot of people that listen to my podcast in like the next few years. But it's like one of those things where I got to learn more about it myself,
Well, you're talking on sexybrilliant.org, right? And our mission is all
Boom.
about removing toxic shame. So here we are. Thank you so much, Mark. And there's so much more to learn from you, and I'm sure I would
Likewise.
love to have you back as a guest and share more wisdom about everything that's going on and how you made it, because we also want to learn about your startup stories and everything. But in the meantime, everybody, make sure you're checking out Mark and Mark's work at markmetry.com. LinkedIn is big for Mark. He's a great writer. He's a great inspiration to me. And I'm so honored and humbled you're here. And everybody who's here, please make sure that if you found any wisdom in Mark's work, make sure that you are sharing this video, this broadcast, because you are contributing to a nonprofit mission of removing toxic shame and raising human consciousness. And we truly need your help to help others. Thank you so much.
That's awesome. You guys are awesome. Devina, you're awesome.
I love you, Mark. Thank you so much for being on today's show. I'll see you soon, guys. And check out sexybrilliant.org for more behind-the-scenes content. Namaste.
Namaste. Be more sexy brilliant.